Do you ever feel like something's off, like you're carrying invisible weight every day? But when the VA looks at you, all they see is someone who's functioning just fine? Maybe your claim came back lower than expected. Maybe the doctor barely looked up during your C&P exam, or maybe they checked a few boxes and told you you're stable. But deep down, you know you're not. And the hardest part? The pain isn't always physical, it's emotional. And that kind of suffering? It doesn't show up on X-rays. If you've ever walked out of a VA appointment feeling unheard, unseen, or misunderstood, you are not alone. Thousands of veterans have emotional symptoms that scream for help, but get dismissed as mild or not severe enough. So today, we're going to reveal 5 powerful emotional signs that could prove you deserve a higher VA rating, even if the doctor disagrees. These are the subtle, but life-altering signs the system often overlooks. And once you know what they are, you'll never second-guess your experience again. Stay with me until the end, because if you've been told you're fine when you're clearly struggling, this might be the one video that finally speaks your truth. Let's get into it. You don't need to be in combat to feel like your body's still at war. If you're constantly tense, jump at sudden sounds, or find yourself scanning every room for exits, even at a quiet family gathering, your nervous system hasn't shut off. That feeling of being on guard 24/7 isn't just anxiety, it's hypervigilance, and it's one of the clearest signs of unresolved trauma. What makes it so damaging is that it hides in plain sight. You might tell yourself you're just cautious or that you don't like surprises. But what's really happening is your mind has stopped trusting that you're safe, even when there's no threat around. Doctors sometimes overlook this because you look calm on the outside. You show up, you smile, you nod. But what they don't see is your heart racing when someone knocks on your door unexpectedly, or the way you sit with your back to the wall at every restaurant, or how you flinch when someone raises their voice, even if it's just during a sports game. Hypervigilance slowly drains you. It disrupts your sleep, your relationships, and your ability to relax, if you can even remember what relaxing feels like. And when your body is in a constant state of stress, it starts breaking down in ways doctors don't always measure. If this sounds familiar, don't brush it off. It's not just how you are. It's a legitimate symptom of a deeper issue. And if your VA rating didn't reflect that, it might not be because it wasn't real. It might be because they didn't ask the right questions, or you were too used to living like this to know it wasn't normal. And the worst part? This is just one of several signs that often go ignored. And the next one can be even harder to admit. At first, it might not seem like a big deal. You skip a hobby one weekend, cancel a fishing trip, or stop calling back your old friends. But over time, the things that once brought you peace, joy, or even just a sense of normalcy start to fade into the background. And eventually you realize you don't miss them, you just feel numb. This isn't about being lazy or needing to get out more. It's a deeper emotional shutdown, a sign that your system is trying to protect itself from further pain by disconnecting from everything, good and bad. Veterans dealing with depression or trauma-related disorders often experience something called anhedonia. That's the clinical word for not being able to feel pleasure. But the experience is much more personal and much more isolating. Maybe you used to love grilling with friends, or fixing up cars, or watching the sunrise with a cup of coffee. But now you're just going through the motions, or worse, not even trying anymore. And the part that stings the most? You can't explain why. You just feel like you're fading into the background of your own life. The VA rating system tends to favor what's visible: panic attacks, hospital visits, medication lists. But emotional flatlining? That can get brushed aside as mild depression or adjustment issues. Yet it's often one of the clearest signals that something is deeply wrong. You're not just sad, you're disconnected. And that kind of emotional shutdown doesn't just affect your mental health, it affects your relationships, your ability to work, and your will to keep going. If you've quietly stopped caring about the things that once made life worth showing up for, that's not nothing. That's not getting older or being tired. That's a warning light on the dashboard. And if the VA missed that, it doesn't mean it's not real. It means you need to fight for the recognition you deserve. Because the next sign reveals just how much that emotional weight can spill into every part of your life. You're sitting at home, everything's quiet, but your body feels like it's bracing for something. A loud noise outside. Your heart jumps. Someone walks up behind you. You flinch. It's like your nervous system is stuck in combat mode, even though the war ended years ago. This kind of constant tension doesn't always show up on paper. It won't necessarily get flagged during a C&P exam unless you say the exact right words. But living with it? That's a whole different story. Hypervigilance, being constantly alert, scanning for threats, never fully relaxed, is one of the most common symptoms of PTSD and trauma-related disorders. And it wears you down over time. Maybe you don't sleep well because your brain doesn't fully shut off. Maybe you always sit with your back to the wall in restaurants or avoid crowds because you feel trapped. Maybe your family says you're too jumpy, or your partner tells you you're always on edge. These things add up. They affect how you live, how you connect, how you function in the world. The problem is, if you've been living like this long enough, it can start to feel normal. You get used to clenching your jaw all day. You get used to checking the locks 5 times before bed. But just because it's familiar doesn't mean it's healthy. And it definitely doesn't mean the VA should overlook it. Doctors might ask if you've had panic attacks, but they don't always ask how often you feel tense, how often you struggle to calm down, or how much energy it takes just to appear fine in public. That silence, it can cost you benefits you've more than earned. If your body and mind are constantly in fight or flight, even when you're supposed to be safe, that's not a minor symptom. That's a sign your nervous system is still trying to survive something it never fully recovered from. And if that's happening, you deserve more than a 30% rating and a hang in there. You deserve to be seen for what you're actually carrying. Because this kind of emotional load isn't just exhausting, it's disabling. You stop answering texts. You make excuses to avoid family gatherings. You feel drained after simple conversations, like even small talk takes more effort than it should. Slowly but surely, you're pulling away from everyone. And the worst part is, you can't quite explain why. Maybe you tell yourself you're just tired, or you've outgrown certain friendships. Maybe you convince yourself it's just easier to be alone. But deep down, there's a different truth. Emotional numbness, social withdrawal, and isolation are major red flags that your mental health is suffering and that your current VA rating might not reflect the full impact. For veterans dealing with conditions like PTSD, depression, or anxiety, detaching from others isn't about choice. It's about survival. When you've been through enough pain, keeping your distance starts to feel safer. You stop opening up because you're tired of explaining. You avoid phone calls because pretending you're okay is too exhausting. You dread seeing people because you know they'll ask how you're doing, and you don't know how to answer that anymore. This kind of emotional shutdown is more than just feeling down. It's losing the ability to feel connected, even to people you love. It's watching relationships fade and not having the energy or the will to save them. It's a slow drift away from everything that once made you feel human. Here's the kicker. The C&P exam may ask a few questions about your relationships, but they won't always dig deep enough to capture the isolation you live with every day. If you say you still talk to family or have a friend or two, that can be enough for them to downplay the severity. But they won't see that your conversations are surface level or that you haven't opened up emotionally in months, maybe years. Social withdrawal is a massive indicator that a veteran's emotional and psychological load is heavier than what's being acknowledged. If you've gone from being outgoing to avoiding people altogether, from feeling deeply to feeling Nothing at all. That's not something the VA should ignore. It's something they should recognize and rate properly, because the quietest symptoms are often the ones that hurt the most. You show up. You smile when expected. You say, "I'm good," even when you're falling apart inside. You've learned how to look okay on the outside, even when nothing feels right on the inside. And at first glance, that might sound like strength, but what it really is survival. Masking your symptoms isn't a sign that you're doing well. It's a sign that you've learned to suffer quietly, and that might be the biggest reason your VA rating is too low. The truth is, many veterans, especially those dealing with PTSD, depression, or anxiety, become experts at hiding their pain. You don't want to seem weak. You don't want to explain the same story over and over. And honestly, you're not even sure anyone would understand if you did. So you fake being fine. You laugh at jokes that don't land. You push through daily routines with numbness. You show up for work, say the right things, go through the motions. Meanwhile, no one sees the panic attacks, the nightmares, the guilt, the emotional shutdowns that hit when you're alone. The VA system often rewards what it sees. If you appear functional, hold down a job, or carry on polite conversation during a C&P exam, they may assume your symptoms are mild or manageable. But they don't see what happens behind closed doors. They don't see how much energy it takes to keep that mask on. They don't ask what it costs you to function. And they rarely recognize the emotional exhaustion it creates. You might even be praised for your composure during the exam. "You seem well adjusted," they'll say, but they won't ask what happens when the doors close. When the nightmares come, when the walls feel like they're closing in and there's no one left to talk to. That part, that gets missed. And when it's missed, your rating suffers. But just because you've gotten good at hiding the damage doesn't mean it's not real. It doesn't mean you're okay. And it sure as hell doesn't mean the VA should ignore it. If your emotional distress is buried beneath years of coping, masking, or people-pleasing, it's time to dig deeper, because you deserve to be rated based on your reality, not just your performance. And if the doctors didn't catch it, that's not your fault. It's their oversight, not your burden. If any part of this hit home, it's because deep down, you already know something's been off. You've been carrying more than most people ever see, pushing through symptoms, surviving the system, and still being told your rating doesn't match your reality. And the worst part? When the VA downplays your emotional struggles, it can start to make you question yourself. You wonder if maybe you're overreacting, if maybe you don't deserve more. But let me be clear, the way you feel is real. The impact on your daily life is valid. And just because a doctor missed it in a 20-minute exam doesn't mean your pain isn't worth recognition. This isn't about trying to game the system. It's about telling the truth, your full truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Because the truth is what gets overlooked the most when you're taught to downplay, to mask, to suck it up. If you've seen yourself in any of these signs, don't brush it off. Don't let one bad exam define your whole case. And don't assume the VA always gets it right the first time. They don't, and you're allowed to challenge that. The first step, acknowledging that your emotional health matters just as much as anything else. The second, making sure your voice is heard in your records, your statements, and your appeals. You're not asking for special treatment. You're asking for fairness, for recognition, for what you've already earned through the battles you've fought, both on the outside and inside. Thank you for spending this time with us today. If this video helped you feel seen or gave you a clearer understanding of your own experience, we'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us which sign resonated most with you or how you're planning to move forward from here. Your story might help someone else who feels like they're alone in this, and if you haven't already, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss a story that could help you or someone you care about. Your support allows us to keep creating content that informs, empowers, and tells the truth, the kind the VA system doesn't always want to talk about. We see you, we hear you, and we're glad you're here. See you in the next one.